My next guest was drafted by the Dallas Mavericks, played for Team USA, and had his Vanderbilt jersey retired. But now he's focused on what should be taught in the locker room. Shan Foster, welcome to the Sami Cone Show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I mean, we could just talk basketball this whole time, but you are really taking a stance on, kind of leading men in a different direction, and it's really important. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days?
Absolutely. Listen, this issue of violence against women and girls is really an epidemic in our country and in the world. When you think about the statistics, 1 out of every 4 women experiencing domestic violence, 1 out of 5 women being sexually assaulted, 1 out of every 7 boys have been sexually abused. And they never talk about it. It's time for us to start talking about it. And so that's what our work is really all about with AMEND Together through the YWCA, and then partnering with A Call to Men and with Allstate and other schools here locally and also nationally to really start having these conversations in locker rooms and male-only spaces that are about healthy masculinity, healthy manhood, how to value and respect women, and on our journey to becoming really good men.
Yeah, there's a documentary we're going to talk about that's coming up in just a minute. But I also have to ask, as someone that grew up in locker rooms, what really made you want to kind of turn the conversation differently, and what made you realize not only did you want to, it has to, because you've been a proponent for race, gender, diversity, all of that, but why? What was the switch for you that was like, this is what I need to speak on?
Well, when you think about how many people are impacted, I'll never forget when I first joined the YWCA and started doing this work and got a chance to hear from not only victims and survivors, but also from men and boys who are either affected or effected by this kind of violence. No one thinks it's a good thing. No one likes that this is even happening, but very few people had real solutions and what to do about it. And as we started diving into being a part of the solution, we wanted to give others the opportunity to engage in ways that doesn't put themselves in harm's way, but that allows them to make change not only systematically, but also generationally.
I'm glad you said that, because as a parent of a son who's now in college, I'm thinking, what could I have said earlier? How you're starting with some kids that are pretty young. How do you really navigate those difficult conversations without introducing them to something too early, but making sure that they're not surprised when these things happen, hopefully not to them, but even around them?
Well, you have to be relatable. You have to meet people where they are. So if we're working with kids in elementary school, what are you seeing? Who are your mentors? Who are you looking up to? What kind of language is being used in those spaces? And being able to differentiate what's healthy, what's unhealthy, what leads to some really unhealthy actions towards yourself, towards others around you, and what has been the example of other men who have gone before you in these spaces. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of violence that has taken place, and little even jokes, that's what she said, or nice putt, Alice, or all of these things that happen in male-only spaces. It really creates a culture where women are looked at as less valuable and the property of men, and it creates what Tony Porter calls the fertile ground that allows this violence to exist. And so we want to be able to be a part of the change, right? Not just talking about the issues, but truly talking about solutions. How do we get in front of this? How do we stop it before it ever starts? And that's why this work is so important, and it's about prevention. We're about stopping this before it ever becomes a problem.
Yeah, and one of the ways you're doing that, there's a special documentary screening that's happening on October 15th, Locker Room Talk. Before I let you go, tell us about that.
Listen, this is a tremendous opportunity for the city of Nashville to really bring the family to come and have meaningful conversations. We're going to have some Titans players that are going to be there. They stepped up and helping to partner on this, and really excited about that conversation. But it's just about real talk, the things that, as a dad, as a mom, maybe you don't know the words to use. Maybe you don't know what's happening in the locker room today because you're not in that space. This gives us a real documentary of kids who walked alongside Tony in this walk and journey and had those conversations, and we're going to help model what that looks like to dive into some real talk. It won't be too vulgar, but we're also going to be very honest about how we got to this place and how we as men and boys, how parents, how coaches can start to change this narrative going forward.
Shan Foster, thank you for the work you're doing with AMEND Together. Make sure you check out the Locker Room Talk documentary on October 15th here in Nashville. A very special screening and panel, as Shane mentioned. We'll link to that to make sure you can take every opportunity you can to see that. Thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.